Hey, Eileen, how are you?
Okay, how are you? Having trouble, Rob's, so for some reason,
Yeah, I see him, but
I can't, I've tried 3 times, like, it's not,
not coming over.
no, so maybe he just has to.
There's Wolfgang.
Hello, everyone.
How okay? Did I get it? Yeah.
Going on?
Oh, okay. Is it Rob?
I think you've dropped.
Oh, I don't know if this is our Joe. Usually he comes over as Joe.
Good
Yeah.
morning, good evening.
What's going on, Steve? Yeah, I know it says there's Jessica.
Hi Eileen, how are you?
Hi, Steve.
Wolfgang, everybody.
No, I can hear you.
Do you want to bring the Joe over and see if that's him?
Yeah, let me see.
Hey, Jessica. Good evening, counselor.
How is everyone?
Super. Hey, Graham.
I tried bringing them over. Maybe I'll do. The person who's listed in the gallery as Joe, if it's Joe Steinberg, can you just raise your hand? I'm trying to get you over here. It might just be a different Joe.
It might be, yeah. Let me call him quick. So what we can probably do is start, Joe's gonna jump on in a minute. What we'll probably do now is we're gonna get through the minutes and memorializations, and then hopefully he will be here, because as simple math shows, there are very few of us this evening. So right now there are 4, with Joe we'll have 5. That's gonna be it. So go ahead, Eileen.
Okay, in accordance with section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would be taking place on Monday, November 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m. via Zoom webinar. Steve Toger,
Here.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Jessica Glatt,
Here.
Chairman Craig Plattner.
Here. Good evening. We're going to start this evening with approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes that need to be approved. So starting with the 9/19/22 set, who's eligible on that?
Eligible are, that are here tonight, Steve Wolfgang, Jessica Craig.
Great. Any corrections or changes to those minutes as presented? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve said minutes.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Next up, we have the minutes of 10/3/22. Same thing.
Yeah, Steve Wolfgang, Jessica Craig.
Okay. Any changes or corrections to that set of minutes? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
Move approval of minutes of 10/3/22.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay, next we're gonna move up to the memorializations. We have three this evening that were submitted, starting with calendar 38/80/22 and Marana Chaudhry at 17 Haddonfield Road in Short Hills. Who's eligible on this?
Let's see, Wolfgang, Jessica Craig.
Okay, so it's the three of us. Any corrections or changes to that memorialization? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
I'll
Wolfgang,
second.
going on the second, roll call.
Sure. Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt,
Yes.
Craig Plattner.
Yes. Next up, we have calendar 38/85/22 N Dedic and N Sessom, 513 on Wyoming Avenue in Millburn. Eligible?
Eligible, Steve Wolfgang, Jessica Craig.
Okay. Any corrections or changes to that memorialization? If not, can I have a motion?
I move approval of memorializations for calendar number 3885-22.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt,
Yes.
Craig Plattner.
Yes. And lastly, we have calendar 38/88/22 39 Stewart Road LLC, 39 Stewart Road, Short Hills.
Same four.
Same, okay. Any corrections or changes to that memorialization? If not, can I have a motion?
Move approval.
A second?
Second.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt,
Yes.
Craig Plattner.
Yes. So I don't see Joe signing on as of
Not
yet,
seen.
so let's bring over our first applicant, calendar 38/89/22, Cornelius and Dongmei Guth. Trying to see.
We need, can we even do it? Well, they're an FAR. I
Well,
don't
so
know,
I just want to talk to him first.
Yeah, we're just gonna bring them over and have a
I don't know which one
discussion.
they are.
Yeah, if you're here on that
If you're here-
application, could you please raise your hand in the audience? The attendees. That would be calendar 38/89/22 9 Bailey Road.
I did send them an email indicating that, the circumstances tonight, that if they wanted to proceed, they certainly could, but that they needed 5 affirmative votes. If they wanted to be carried, we could certainly carry them to one of our December dates to be heard.
Is there anyone here from XOY?
Yeah, that's the only contact information that I had, so I did contact them. They may have gotten back after.
Or they may have taken your email, meaning that they're not gonna proceed tonight.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, here's Joe. Let me
I just
bring-
moved them over. Hopefully they'll show up.
Okay, perfect. So,
All right, well, then that one's going, if you're here tonight on that application, which is 9 Bailey Road, 388922 Cornelius and Dongmei Guth. That will not be moving forward tonight, based on the applicant not being here. So we'll have to notify them, I guess, then if we're gonna move this.
Yeah, I told them we could move it, we could carry it to the December 5th meeting. That agenda is being done tomorrow, so I certainly, you be quiet.
All right, so if you're here in the audience tonight for that application, plan on it being moved to December 5th. Please keep an eye out on the website, township website, to see when that happens, if you are here to participate as part of that application.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can just add that since that, and what's that application number?
That's 388922.
So that application will be carried to the December 5th, 2022 meeting of this board via Zoom webinar. No further notice will be provided by the applicant.
Like I said, keep the look on the website. So next up, we'll be moving to calendar 380021. We'll bring over Mr. Levine. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Just fine, Mr. Chairman. How are you this evening?
Very good.
Good.
Anyone you need to bring over before we get started?
We'll need to bring over Matt Flynn.
Okay.
We should probably bring over the rabbi, and at this point, I think that's all we need to bring over at the moment.
Sounds good.
And just to get on the record, Joe Steinberg is here, so he wasn't here when I took the roll call. Just wanted to- Okay, we have Matt. For some reason, the rabbi is not responding.
Mr. Flynn, if you could turn on your camera and your microphone, please. Good evening. How are you?
Good, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Very well. We're trying to bring over the rabbi, but he's either not accepting the promotion to panelist, or maybe he's not at his computer.
Yeah.
If that's the case, either put your hand up so we know you got us, or re-log in. That's to Rabbi Bogomilsky. Does that deter you from starting your testimony, Mr. Levine, or no?
It doesn't, Mr. Chairman. It's just one of the other folks that I know had joined in that may need to answer some questions. I wasn't planning to elicit any direct testimony from the rabbi, so we can certainly move forward with the supplemental testimony that Mr. Flynn has.
Okay, so Mr. Flynn, you were previously sworn in. Are we good with that, Rob?
Yes, we are. And just to confirm that Mr. Flynn was previously qualified as the applicant's professional planning witness.
Mr. Flynn, will you be exercising that capacity this evening?
He has to
You're
unmute. Mute.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Levine, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, good evening. Michael Levine with Fox Rothschild this evening on behalf of the High Center 437, 439 Millburn Avenue. As the board's well aware, this is a continuation of a hearing that's been before the board a number of times over this past year. The last time we were before the board, Mr. Flynn provided some land use planning testimony in support of the application. Was subject to extensive cross-examination and questions from members of the public. And at the tail end of the proceedings, there was a request from at least one or two of the board members, because Mr. Flynn had been testifying that in his opinion, the scope of the house of worship that's proposed for this location is relatively modest. He characterized it a number of times as a relatively small house of worship. And that raised a question in at least some of the board members' minds as to, well, if that's your opinion, how does that in fact compare scope-wise and scale-wise with some of the other existing houses of worship in town? Which is certainly a fair question. And it was towards the end of the hearings, we've had an opportunity to investigate that further. And we would like to share that additional information with the board this evening. Board will recall that we've already heard expert testimony from the applicant's civil engineer, from the applicant's architect, from Rabbi Bogomilsky, who's provided testimony with regard to activities that would be conducted at the site, numbers of people, hours, days of the week, what have you. Mr. Flynn is providing planning testimony, and I'm not, unless I certainly would reserve the right to recall witnesses to the extent there are new issues or questions. I'm anticipating that Mr. Flynn will be the last of my direct witnesses. I'm also aware that the board only has 5 members here this evening. Mr. Simon was kind enough to bring that to my attention beforehand. And we'd like to make efficient use of the board's time and hopefully get the last of our testimony in. And I know the interested members of the public have been tuning in repeatedly for a number of times over the course of the year. They certainly should be given the opportunity. They've been limited to questions thus far. They should be given their opportunity to make statements. And hopefully at a future scheduled hearing, in the interim, the absent board members could become eligible to vote. And we're hopeful that we could just have a summation and the board's deliberation and vote with the benefit of a full 7-member board at that final future hearing.
So here's the situation. All that, yes, agree to all of it. And so here, just so everyone at home understands what's going on this evening, we do have a very small board here tonight because of the holiday. There's several board members could not make it. So as Mr. Levine correctly stated, that this evening we will finish with Mr. Flynn's testimony. The audience will be given the opportunity to question Mr. Flynn on any of the testimony that he gives this evening. Once that is finished, we will open the attendee section up for comments. Okay, so you'll be able to comment on the case, which has not been done up until this point. Then we will move forward with a vote at a later date. We will most likely be voting, well, actually most likely, we will be voting this year. Let's put it that way. We do have a couple members that are going to be rolling off the board. And I do not want to put this application in any sort of jeopardy of having new members come on. And it'd be very difficult for them to catch up on 1 year of testimony, because that's basically what we have here is almost a full year of testimony to catch up on. So with that, Mr. Levine or Mr. Flynn, let it go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, after our last hearing, have you had an opportunity to look into some of the specific questions that some of the board members have, particularly as it relates to the kind of scale and scope of other existing houses of worship in town that either supports, or hopefully supports your characterization of the proposed house of worship as relatively modest in size and scope? Have you had an opportunity to look into that further?
I have.
And I'd like for you, if you could, to share those additional insights with the board, please.
Sure. Just by brief way of background for the board and for the public, this is a conditional use variance. We are proposing a house of worship in the R6 zone. Basically what that means is, as a conditional use, there are certain conditions that we have to comply with, and if we can't, we need to request that D3 conditional use variance. I think it's important to keep in mind that this is not a D1 use variance. It's not specifically prohibited or excluded from the zone. Or in other words, I would say that the value of a conditional use is kind of embedded into the fact that it has been included in the zoning ordinance for this specific zone. And the fact that we are requesting some conditional use variances, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is a applicable and appropriate zone and an appropriate location for the proposed house of worship. And I think that it's fair to say that the focus at the last hearing was on the negative criteria or the potential impact to the public, as opposed to the positive criteria. Houses of worship are an inherently beneficial use, as per our courts, meaning that the positive criteria or the benefits of the use are automatically satisfied. And again, that's been recognized by our courts. So as council mentioned at the last hearing, I did testify that this is a small house of worship. And basically where I was going with that was I was comparing it to what the zoning ordinance contemplates. So basically the zoning ordinance requires as a conditional use, as a condition, 3 acres for a house of worship in the R6 zone. And having said that, it does permit 23% building coverage. So that would yield a building footprint of 30,000 square feet, and the proposed house of worship is only 4,324 square feet. So 14% less than I would say what the zoning ordinance contemplates for a house of worship in this zone. Having said that, the board did comment that they would like to know how the proposed house of worship compares to other houses of worship in the township in terms of size. So again, my testimony at the last hearing was really in relation to how this proposed building relates to the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And as council mentioned, in preparation of this hearing, I did look at how this house of worship compares with other ones throughout the township. So I'll walk the board through that comparative analysis in just a minute. And with the chairman's permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Sure, feel free.
Mr. Flynn, are you about to share your screen with an exhibit or exhibits that have not yet been provided to the board?
Yes.
Eileen, do you recall what we're up to in terms of exhibit markings or?
Fortunately, I only have the minutes from the last meeting, and we didn't enter anything. I don't know if there's anything.
I mean, according to my records, and maybe Mr. Levine, if you can chime in here as well. I know we marked A1, but I don't know if we have any other exhibit other than A1 marked.
Just, Mr. Simon, what do your notes show that A1 is?
Hold on a second. I have A1, 7 slides, renderings, photos of the site and plans. It was, I believe it was during Mr. Dubinette's testimony.
It was. I actually found I had the same notes, 7 slides in the 3D rendering and site photos. All the other exhibits that we've testified to must have been just mounted copies of the submitted plans.
Right. According to my notes, I don't see any other reference to an actual marked exhibit.
That's right. We submitted several copies of the site plan, from the original 2001 application. We submitted, 18 some odd copies to the board. I know those were distributed in advance, so there too, I think those were just referred to by sheet and date. So I think we're in agreement. We're probably just, believe it or not, up to only A2.
Yes. Okay, so with that, if you want to, Matt, share your screen and start off by identifying for the record what we're going to mark as A2. And I would ask certainly that for this exhibit and any other exhibit that is being marked or entered by the applicant, or certainly by any other interested party, that copies of which are emailed tomorrow to Eileen at the Millburn offices.
We'll certainly do that, Mr. Simon.
Thank you.
Okay, so with all that, this is a 6-page exhibit for the record that we'll call Exhibit A2, which is entitled Planning Exhibits for Chi Center for Living Judaism, prepared by me on November 14th, 2022. And like I said, I just wanted to revisit, I did put on the record at the last hearing, the fact that I did an analysis of conforming properties in terms of lot area. So as I said, the condition for lot area for houses of worship in the residential zones is 3 acres. So at the last hearing, I did put on the record that there were 18 properties that I identified throughout the township that had 3 acres in lot area and were in residential zones. Basically, I further refined that analysis based on this little box, this legend that we see in the bottom left-hand corner here, based on the fact that as further conditions on top of lot area, houses of worship must be on properties that have frontage on primary, secondary, or collector streets, a minimum lot frontage of 200 feet, a minimum lot depth of 250 feet, and they're basically conditionally permitted in all residential zones, all R zones, except the R8 zone. And so having refined that analysis with those parameters, basically I ended up with 11 properties that conform with all of those conditions. Having said that, these are all properties that are already developed, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But I think that at this point, it's important to note that, again, this is an inherently beneficial use. So our courts have determined that this use does belong somewhere. It has inherent value to municipalities. And basically what we're looking at is the fact that it is extremely difficult to find a property to locate this inherently beneficial use. If we shift over to sheet 2 now. Actually, I think it, well, sorry. Sheet 2 narrows us down to 4 properties, basically by excluding existing houses of worship and existing schools. And the reason that we did that was basically because those properties are unlikely to be sold and demolished in favor of another house of worship. What we're looking at here are 4 properties that contain single-family dwellings, which I would say are more likely to have that happen, to be sold to make way for a house of worship. But having said that, they are developed. They're developed with single family dwellings. I just included this sheet just to show that of all of these properties that meet all of these parameters, these are the only 4 that I would say are somewhat likely to be sold and developed in that regard. So I just wanted to put that on the record and show the board these maps here, just to show that I did refine that analysis to which I think is more appropriate and better reflects the condition and the availability of lots throughout the township for a house of worship. And the point being that there are few, if any, opportunities for development without requesting some type of variance, whether it be lot area, lot frontage, lot depth, etc. So that shifts over to sheet 3. And basically what I did here was I compiled a list of all of the houses of worship in Millburn Township, and I rated them in terms of lot area. So from top to bottom, it would be the smallest property that has a house of worship on the top, and then the largest property that has a house of worship on the bottom. And what we see here is that we're somewhere in the middle. So there are actually 5 houses of worships on properties that are smaller than what's being proposed this evening. And the, number 6, just as an example, is the next property that's the next largest, is only 1.37. Again, we're proposing 0.85 acres. So again, we're somewhere right in the middle of these 12 existing houses of worship in terms of lot area. The next slide, sheet 4, rates all of the existing houses of worship now by building footprint. So again, the board requested some information in terms of how large the other houses of worship are and how we stack up against those existing houses of worship. And I'll just, as a caveat here, these numbers were basically approximations that I've done, just looking at aerial imagery and using some planning software that I have available to me. So despite the fact that they are approximations, they are relatively accurate to some degree. And basically what they show is that in terms of building footprint, we are on the low end of all of the existing houses of worship. We're only the 3rd largest house of worship out of the 12 that are existing in the township. So to the extent that the board wanted that information in terms of how large we are compared to the other houses of worship, I think that this table does a good job at showing that we are in fact small relative to those other ones. And before I move over to the next slide, I just want to mention that the 2 that are above us, the 2 smaller buildings, Covenant Presbyterian and Mount Zion AME. The next slide is going to show us building coverage as a % of lot area. And what we'll see is that despite those houses of worship being smaller than us, their lot area is actually their building coverage is significantly larger than what we're proposing. So again, that was Mount Zion, which is actually at the top of this list in terms of building coverage, and I'm on sheet 5 now, at 34% building coverage. And the other one was Covenant at 24% building coverage, which is to say that we are a smaller building, and we actually are smaller relative to the lot area itself when we compare it to some of these other houses of worship in the township. At just 12% building coverage, again, we are on the low end of building coverage. And basically building coverage as a function of building footprint divided by lot area, I think is an appropriate analysis when we're measuring how intense a development is on a particular property. Certainly when we're looking at building footprint itself, it doesn't really weigh in the visual impact of having something that covers a certain amount of the property. So I think that this analysis does justice to show that in terms of a visual impact, it will be significantly less impactful from a visual perspective than some of these other buildings. And finally, sheet 6 compiles all of that information, lot area, building footprint, and building coverage. And like I said, those two houses of worship, Mount Zion and Covenant, that have a smaller building footprint than us, we can see here that their building coverage is actually substantially larger. So having said all of that, I think that it really stands to reason that this is a small house of worship, not only in terms of the zoning ordinance, which I went into at the last hearing, but also in terms of what we actually see on the ground in terms of the developed houses of worship throughout the township, both in terms of building footprint, as well as in terms of building coverage. So now that I walked the board through all of this, just to tie all of that back into the analysis that I started at the last hearing, the zoning ordinance really does contemplate these larger houses of worship, again, contemplating a house of worship with a building footprint of about 30,000 square feet. Again, being a function of the minimum lot area of 3 acres and the building coverage allowance of 23%. What we see here is a house of worship that's just over 4,000 square feet. So despite the fact that we're looking at a house of worship that is very small, not only relative to the zoning ordinance, but also relative to other houses of worship, substantially less impactful than what the zone plan contemplates, as well as to what's around us in terms of other houses of worship. Despite all of that, it's under a greater level of scrutiny than a larger house of worship would be. And that's simply because, again, the zoning ordinance really is geared towards these larger houses of worship, or in other words, I think I've heard the term mega churches in the past. So having said that, again, we are requesting variances, some conditional use variances. But I think it's important to stress that despite the fact that these are variances, they do not have a substantially negative impact on the neighborhood or the zone plan. Again, it's an inherently beneficial use as a house of worship. And I would say that this is, I would say that there is adequate testimony on the record and evidence at this point that this is substantially smaller than the other houses of worship that we see in the township. And with that, I think I can close and open myself up to questions or redirect.
Well, leave that open a quick second. Go back to that.
Sure.
Your slideshow.
Yep.
Now go back to your second slide.
The map.
Sorry, third. We have
This-
list. Yeah, that's fine. How many of those house of worship predate zoning code?
I think probably the safest answer at this point is that I haven't done that analysis. I could probably give you an answer, but just out of precaution, I wasn't really prepared to answer that.
Do you have any idea of parking deficiencies on these houses of worship that you're using here?
Yeah, I do have somewhat of an idea. I think that in terms of what I can say most confidently, Mount Zion actually has no parking. Wyoming,
By the way, when Mount Zion was built, did cars exist?
I don't know.
Okay.
Wyoming Presbyterian does not have parking. Based on my analysis, I tried to assess which properties appeared to have deficient parking or very little parking, but again, out of precaution, I don't know exactly how much parking would be required for those particular houses of worship. So I'm not 100% sure which ones would require variances for parking.
If you were to compare building coverage to square footage, how many of these would deviate significantly from your building coverage to your square footage? Like take Mount Zion, for example. That's a single story church, correct?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, then I can't ask that question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, are you asking him about, FAR for the
Yeah,
various?
more along the lines of FAR as a representation of scale, as opposed to just saying building coverage. Because clearly a single floor house of worship has a very different scale than a multi-story building, even though the building coverage may be 4,300 square feet, your actual square footage or FAR, as you would equate it to a home, is significantly larger. Is that correct, Mr. Flynn?
If you consider a second floor, you would have more floor area, correct?
And that would that be the case with, say, like a Mount Zion or Covenant Presbyterian? I mean, I guess you're not familiar with those actual buildings, correct?
I'm familiar to a certain extent.
What extent would that be?
I mean, I've done an analysis based on, again, lot area, building coverage, building footprints. To the
But a building
extent,
but a building footprint isn't exactly a indicator of much. I mean, how is it a 10-story building?
is what a 10-story building?
Any of these? Are they large, tall structures? Because I mean, obviously you're looking at just from a sky, you're only going to get actually a single story. But if you have a multiple story building, like is Christ Church a multiple story building?
I'm not 100% sure, but while we're going through this, I can check.
Well, Matt, why don't you explain for the board what you looked at in order to arrive at the calculations that you did do for purposes of your testimony? I mean, did you look at Google Maps? What did you do in order to identify these properties and make calculations with regard to lot area and building coverage?
Yeah, so I have a
Not
software. It's a common software for planners. It's known as ArcGIS. And basically I throw in some aerial imagery and then I trace around the building to get the square footage of building footprint, which again is an approximation. But when we relate that to the size of the property, I would say that the percentages that I get are a good reflection of what's on the ground in terms of building footprint and building coverage. And I guess to the chairman's point, to the extent that I haven't looked at building height and number of stories, I would say that many of the conditions, well, first of all, there is a condition that building height shall not exceed the maximum established for any underlying residential zone district. We're not requesting a variance for building height. But to the extent that I looked at building coverage and building footprints, there are most of these conditions, and I'll just list some of them out. Minimum front yard setback, minimum side yard setback, minimum rear yard setback, minimum buffer to residential, minimum parking setback, lot coverage. All of these really have nothing to do with the height or the number of stories of particular buildings. They really have to do with how much land is available and how much an existing building is spread across that property. So when we're looking at these conditional use requirements, I would actually say that the analysis that I've done is pretty appropriate when we're talking about all of those conditions.
Matt, did you do any type of Oprah or other municipal investigation as to any approvals or plans on file associated with any of these houses of worship to get a more accurate idea of lot area, building coverage, and the like?
I have not. What I'll say is that lot area is a fairly easy number to get when we look at tax records and the like. So those numbers are pretty reliable, I'll say. But the answer to that question is no.
So how would you compare, say, to like a Wyoming Presbyterian that was built in the late 1800s to a house of worship today? I mean, other than measuring from the sky, the overall footprint, something that predates zoning code, how would you use that as a comparison to something today where obviously there's significantly more zoning code around development?
I don't understand the question. How would I compare them?
Well, you're saying like Wyoming Presbyterian here, okay, like on your list as number 4, okay, put on 0.77 acres. That was built in like 1875. I could be wrong, could have been 1850. Okay, so the zoning or the planning that was used then versus the planning now, would you say that having a larger piece of property is necessary?
Not necessarily, no.
So like, even if a car wasn't invented back when the church was built, in case of Wyoming Presbyterian?
I mean, for what it's worth, some of these existing houses of worship probably predate zoning. And of course, during that time, I'm sure that some of them were built predating the establishment of the automobile. But having said that, currently these houses of worship are in use and are used by people with cars. So I think that it is safe to compare them when we look at the how efficient and how safe the circulation and traffic movement is on one particular property as opposed to another, how much traffic congestion, et cetera. And we do have expert testimony on the record from last hearing from our engineer regarding the fact that, and from our rabbi, regarding the fact that our parking is adequate, given the demand of the members of this Chi Center.
Any
Mr.
other
Chairman,
questions from the board? I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
and I just want to just follow up on a couple of things. In your A2, is there any identification of what zones these houses of worship are currently in?
I didn't indicate. I can provide that information if the board wants. I have it somewhere. I just would have to pull it up, and I could list it out if needed.
Okay. And then going back to the first couple pages of A2. Yeah, where you talked about the number of properties. Yeah, you can stop right there is fine. That the number of properties that conform. Did you take a look at properties that I'll call it conform better than the applicant's current proposal in terms of less of a deviation from, let's say, lot area, for example?
Did I look at other properties?
Yeah,
No.
and so
And
as
I
it
would just-
didn't,
go ahead.
so there may be properties that don't have 3 acres, but have, just for example, 2.5 acres and meet all of the other requirements, including frontage on the type of street and frontage and depth.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. And the only thing that I would add to that is that there is case law out there that I'm sure that you're aware of that does state that the availability of other properties is not a basis for denial of an application. But also what I think is worth noting is the test for the variances that we're seeking are met based on all of the evidence that I've put on the record for the property that's being proposed, or the property in question this evening. So having said that, I wouldn't really necessarily say that the goal is to get as close to conforming as possible and to continue looking for a lot that conforms better in one regard and not the other, and continually searching. I think that the test for this particular property is met, again, by virtue of the scale of the house of worship and the location and et cetera.
Are you aware of any search that was conducted to find any other property other than the one that's being proposed?
I'm aware that there has been a search for other properties, but I can't speak to the specifics.
Okay. Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Graham, you have your hand up. Do you want the screen share up, or do you want it brought down?
It's either way is fine. I just have 2 follow-up questions for Mr. Flynn. First, I just want to thank you for preparation of the exhibit. I think it's helpful for the board and for us to review this. I had 2 follow-up questions. One is, and apologies if I missed it, in your interpolation of the aerial imagery in the ArcGIS analysis that you did, was that inclusive of all buildings on site, or was that just the primary church structure building? I know in some instances there can be multiple structures on particularly some of these older houses of worship properties.
Yeah, for the most part, it really just took into account the main building. But there were some instances where there were, like you said, small accessory buildings that I took into account. But in all instances, when there was a house of worship property that spanned multiple properties, let's say that one had remote parking on another lot. I only looked at the lot that the main building was on.
Okay. And second question, kind of following up on that is, was the imagery that you used to conduct this interpolation analysis, was that leaf on or leaf off imagery, just for clarity?
Leaf off.
Leaf off. Okay. Thank you.
Anything further, Graham? You good?
Can I ask the significance of Graham's last question? I don't understand it.
Sure, I'm happy to follow up. So leaf on would be aerial imagery taken during summer and spring months when there's full tree coverage, which can limit visibility of structures on a site. Leaf off condition would be in fall or winter months where, you know, structures beneath will be more visible. So that was the nature of my question and asking when it was reviewed.
Thank you.
Sure.
You can take the screen share down, Matt. Any other questions by board members? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so Mr. Flynn, I just want to be clear, when you were talking about lot coverage, that included parking spaces available. Is that right?
I did not.
I'm sorry, lot sizes. I beg your pardon. When you were listing lot sizes, the size of the lot, that includes parking spaces.
It depends. So some of these houses of worship actually had remote lots that had parking on a remote property. In those instances, I did not look at those remote lots.
Okay, can you tell us which ones have? Okay, you did not. That's good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for board members? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to open up to the audience for questions only of Mr. Flynn for what he said this evening. Okay, let's try to keep it on point. First up, I see is Sergey K, your hand up. If you'd like to speak, please put your hand up and you can ask Mr. Flynn a question regarding his testimony. When you get brought over, please unmute yourself and please turn on your camera.
Mr. Chairman, if you would also ask, hold on a second, Sergey, if you can also ask each of the questioners to identify themselves by name and address.
Yes. Sergey, if you could please give us your full name and address for Mr. Fishman.
Yes, I'm Sergey Karalov, and I'm at 11 Bodwell Terrace.
And your question for Mr. Flynn.
If you could just spell your name also, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it is Sergei, and last name is Koralov, as in Victor. So I have a question and I guess a bit of a correction for Dr. Flynn. In terms of the dates of buildings established that were in the list I had, since this was discussed earlier, over 4 churches with a smaller coverage. The dates of establishment were, and this is relevant to my question, I'm not just listing that, they were 1865 for Mount Zion, 1858 for First Baptist.
Sergey, you have to, you're not here to provide testimony. You're here to ask a question of Mr. Flynn.
Right. So my question for Dr. Flynn, for Mr. Flynn, is you had a statement that scale of a house of worship, in this case, you feel that the test for the variance is met. I mentioned I'm not sure, I guess, in legal terms, how you judge that it is already met. I thought that that is actually the decision of a board, whether the test for the variance is met or not. But you said that it does not matter how much vertical coverage or how many floors it is. My understanding of the extensive presentation that you made is to argue that these older churches, while they're established and used, the percent of coverage is basically the same or even greater than the one you're requesting variance for. My understanding is that in addition to just purely coverage, what has to be taken into account is number of people that will be attending the services and how heavily the property will be used. So it stands to reason that a 2 or 3 or 4 story building, in your case, a 2-story building with a basement, would actually have far greater impact on the neighborhood in which this building is going to be used. All the churches you've listed were single story, all the churches that kind of have
You have a
a.
question,
Sergey,
Mr. Sergey, you have
yeah,
a question? Yeah, we gotta
You
get to the
have
question.
to
Yes, so
ask
my question
direct
is-
questions.
What is the purpose of your evidence of these 4 churches having greater footprint, if not to say that their impact on the neighborhood is less?
Right, so again, when we look at the spirit of the zoning ordinance and the conditions that are put forth in the ordinance, again, most of them actually relate to, rather than the vertical element of buildings, they actually relate to spatially the side yard, the front yard, the rear yard, buffers to residential properties, parking setbacks, lot coverage. Really, most of them, if not all of them, other than the building height requirement, which directs you back to the underlying zoning requirement. And just for the record, we do not need a variance for building height. I would say that really the spirit of the ordinance is really geared towards that spatial orientation of the development on a property rather than the vertical element.
So I truly believe that the spirit of the ordinance or the spirit of a variance has nothing to do with the impact on the neighborhood in terms of the number of people using the building, the proposed structure.
That's not
None
what
of
I'm
us-
saying. I'm talking about from a visual, and aesthetic component, how much of the property does the building take up? For
But
instance,
I guess your argument for this as a small congregation is based on the ratio of coverage to lot size.
that's part
So
of it.
that is the main part of your presentation, is that it is a small congregation due to the small size or relative percentage of lot coverage. So to me, it seems a bit strange to ignore how many floors or how many congregants can meet and are projected to meet at this building.
Any other questions?
No, but I'm not sure I got an answer, to be honest.
Well, that's not guaranteed.
Fair enough.
If you have anything further questions for Mr. Flynn?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Christine Lama. I believe it's Mr. Lama, though. Once again, if you want any questions for Mr. Flynn, please raise your hands and we'll take you in order.
Evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
Name and address for the record, please.
Solomon Lama, Lama. First name Solomon, Salomon, 438 Millburn Avenue. Mr. Flynn, you testified that congregants going to other churches take cars. A, how do you know that? And B, do you have any numbers to support that?
I don't
Just
think
to-
that was within the scope of the testimony this evening.
I believe he testified, his quote was, people who go to other churches obviously take cars.
I'm not sure if that's exactly, just to clarify, when I think I know what you're referencing. It was when I was responding to the chairman's question of weren't some of these houses of worship built predating cars? And I was, I guess you could call it hypothetically saying that even when we can still take into account the fact that people, even if they did use cars to get to those existing houses of worship, that could still be taken into account. It was hypothetical, I guess. I don't have any numbers to support how many people have cars going to specific houses of worship.
That's my only question. I do have a general question. No one has to answer it.
No.
Okay, okay.
No general
Then-
questions.
Then it was a question about race judicata, but I'll stop.
Okay. Anyone in the audience have any further questions for this witness? Pretty. Hand up. If you could please turn on your camera and your microphone. Good evening, how are you?
Hi, good evening. I'm fine, thank you.
Good, your name and address for the record.
My name is Priti Goswami. My address is 24 Bardwell Terrace, Millburn.
And your question for Mr. Flynn.
So I have 3 questions, but they're not necessarily regarding to today's meeting. They are to Mr. Flynn, but they are follow-up questions from last time. Is this the right time to ask?
No, you must keep it to the testimony that he had this evening.
Fair enough, but then what happens to the questions I have from last time or the previous meetings?
Those are now gone. So that opportunity has been closed. Those were for that meeting. Now we're moving on to this. So if your question is regarding this testimony, you can do that.
Okay, I think I can still ask one question.
Okay.
So we have talked about how it is justified of squeezing the property in less than 30% of the space. And we have clearly that's going to cause a lot of overflow of the people. And although we have discussed about how everything is going to be regulated, being human being, the regulations are not going to be followed. Whose headache is going to be to follow up on the lack of regulations? And how are we going to spend time leaving our work, going and taking care of things which are going to cause disturbance in our block?
This is outside the scope of his testimony this evening. Do you have something related to the actual testimony he made tonight regarding the size of the lot and so forth?
I think it has to do with the size of lot, but fair enough. I don't think I have anything for today, but I definitely had last time. I also had questions regarding to children's safety, and I told I did not have an answer. And it was told that it was noted and will be taken care of. We still don't have an answer for that.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? That we're not discussing that this evening, so child safety is not on the docket.
Will that be considered before any decision is made?
I'm sorry?
Will that be considered before any decision is made?
No, what the chairman was saying accurately is that child safety was not the subject of Mr. Flynn's testimony this evening, and therefore it is not subject to cross-examination this evening. At the appropriate time, when members of the public get a chance to speak and make statements and present any other information that they want to present, all topics that are relevant to the application are in play.
Fair enough. That's what I wanted to know. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Next, anyone else in the audience have any questions for Mr. Flynn? I do not see any hands being raised. So we'll move to comment. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levine, do you have any other redirect or any other witnesses?
I do not know, Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
okay, so with that, We're now opening up to comment. When you raise your hand to speak, you'll be brought over. You just state your full name, your address, and you will be sworn in. Okay, this is all done under oath. I ask you to please not be repetitive. We'll give everyone time to speak because I see there's many attendees here, but try to keep yourself on point. I realize this is Zoom and it's very easy to filibuster and carry on, but we'd like to be considerate of everyone's time and give everyone ample time to speak. But please, please try to keep on point and not be repetitive. First up, we have Mr. Jack Gordon. When everyone comes over, please have your camera on and your mic open.
Okay. Jack Gordon, 27 Bodwell Terrace.
Can you change your orientation anyway, Mr. Gordon? You're sideways to us.
I can. I apologize. I'm talking to you from a hospital bed.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're just going to swear you in. You're muted. There you go.
You just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name and address for the record, please.
Jack Allen Gordon, 27 Bodwell Terrace, Millburn, New Jersey.
Please proceed.
I'd like to do this in 3 parts, and hopefully that will reduce further comments necessary from the public, because I would like to fulsomely cover this application. I'd like to start with the planning board in 1994 that had before it a proposal to combine 437 and 439 Millburn Ave. The planning board denied that application on the basis that doing so would be, quote, inconsistent with the residential character of the neighborhood. That appears in the board's packet at pages 32 to 34. The second application, which was to combine 437 and 439 Millburn Ave together with Bodwell Terrace, was turned down in February of 2002 after 9 nights of hearings by the zoning board. The zoning board found that, quote, the property cannot sustain the proposed use, close quote, that's finding 5.4, and that there was, quote, inadequate buffering, close quote, inadequate parking, close quote, and the proposal as presented constituted, quote, a substantial detriment to the public good. That's finding 5.5. In addition, this same board found that permitting a house of worship in a residential zone on a 0.84 acre lot would represent, quote, a substantial impairment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance because of the minimum lot size, close quote, of 3 acres. That's finding 5.6. You will find those findings in your packets at pages 12 to 31. We talked a lot about res judicata and collateral estoppel, the notion of law of the case. This same board, undoubtedly with a different composition, heard virtually identical testimony. I heard 2 arguments against applying these doctrines. The first was intervening law. That was the Sika versus Wall Township case and the House of Fire versus South Orange case. And the second argument was that the prior applications were for retrofits of the existing buildings, and this application is one for new construction. As for the change in law, and I think this was at best duplicitous on the part of the applicant, the Sika case was decided 2 years before the first denial in 1994. So that's hardly what one could consider new law. And the House of Fire case simply held that a house of worship is presumptively an inherently beneficial use. The House of Fire case did not change the applicant's burden as to the negative and positive criteria. In other words, the applicant must still meet its burden to demonstrate that the combined site and conditional use as a house of worship would be, quote, an appropriate site for the conditional use, close quote, and the conditional use would not pose, quote, a substantial detriment to the public, and, quote, would be without impairment to the zone plan. But this board made these determinations 20 years ago. As for the second argument, that instead of retrofitting a small home, they're going to raise that home and they're going to build, instead of a 3,200 square foot home, a house of worship of 10,321 square feet. That requires 52 spaces instead of the prior 29. And as a new, much bigger facility, it greatly exacerbates the impervious coverage issue and is even further far afield of the, quote, residential character of the neighborhood, close quote. As for alternative sites, and that was in large part the testimony of Mr. Flynn tonight, he admitted that there are at least 4 possible sites that would not require any variances with respect to lot size and that meet both the requirements for dual access, main road or an ancillary road. But the fact of the matter is, on examination by both Sergey and our chairman, it is clear that no real due diligence was done. No comparison was made. No analysis was done of the differences between the few houses of worship that have existed in town since long before these ordinances came into existence. And there was an admission that several of these houses of worships, which are single family or single level edifices, have adequate parking off-site. That's not within the scope of this current application. What was missing entirely from the application is any notion that an examination was done of properties in, for example, the CMO zone instead of the R6 zone, where these variances that are being requested would not be required. It would be a different set of rules. So frankly, the primary problem with trying to squeeze this square peg into a round hole is that the lot is not suitable for the proposed use. We also heard a lot of testimony, not tonight, but at the last hearing in September, that many of the ordinances that were being sought would not be necessary if the High Center were to just simply build a new home on the proposed combined lot. Well, I submit that this testimony was totally irrelevant because the High Center does not want to build a single family dwelling on a combined lot of 0.84 or 0.85 acres. They want to build a temple, i.e. a house of worship, and not a private home. So what does this board have before it a third time if it decides to hear the application despite the applicability of res judicata and collateral estoppel? A litany of variances and waivers, all of which are extreme. Lot size, 3 acres is required. 0.85 acres is available. That's less than 1/3 of what the ordinance requires. On-site parking, 52 parking spaces are required. 25 are proposed. That's less than 1/2 of what's required. Setbacks, the front setback, 100 feet required, 40 feet proposed. That's less than 1/2 of what's required. Parking setback, 20 feet required, 8 feet proposed. That's less than 1/2 of what's required. Buffers, 25-foot buffer is required and less than 8 foot is proposed. That's less than 1/3 of what's required. Impervious coverage. There will be an increase in impervious coverage of more than 25% if this is approved in a town that regularly floods. Steep slope disturbance, not mentioned, but an increase of more than 600%. Lighting. The lighting plan calls for at least a half dozen 16-foot lights, and since it would be almost 3 times brighter than what is permitted in the R6 zone, it would require a design waiver to boot. All of this totally inconsistent with the residential character of the neighborhood. 2 final points. Parking on Bodwell Terrace. For those who have been to every meeting, you'll find this interesting. Mr. Lanzafama, the earlier expert for the applicant, testified that access from Bodwell would be limited to emergency vehicles. But Mr. Flynn admitted that it was also intended for pedestrian access. And you can see this in the stormwater management report at page 5. It specifically states that one of the purposes of having the emergency access is so that pedestrians can walk from Bodwell Terrace to the house of worship. That, I submit, tells the story quite clearly that if this were to be granted, cars will be parking on Bodwell Terrace, and you heard a lot of testimony from my neighbors about the type of street that it is, the amount of children who regularly play on it, and the unacceptable increase in danger to the community as a result of having parking on a dead-end street. And for safety and traffic, you heard testimony from many residents that Bodwell Terrace and at least one other owner of property across the street from the proposed temple, who also asked a question this evening, uniformly shared their views about safety and traffic concern. What you did not hear is the testimony from a single traffic expert about the already burdened intersection and what the incremental impact of having 50 more cars driving onto and driving into Millburn Avenue would have on an already very highly traversed thoroughfare. There was no explanation whatsoever. The burden was on the applicant. So I urge this board to either invoke the doctrine of collateral estoppel, res judicata, or if hearing the application afresh, please listen to your predecessors and your neighbors and deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Gordon. Next, we have Sergey K. to bring over. Good evening again.
Okay,
Good
Sergey,
evening.
yeah, just raise your right hand. Let me swear you. Do you swear from the testimony about to give in tonight's proceedings be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name and address for the record and spelling your name again, please.
Sergey Karalov, S-E-R-G-E-I, and last name is Karalov, K-O-R-A-L-O-V, as in Victor. And I live at 11 Bodwell Terrace.
Your comment.
So I think Jack covered most of the comments that I would have made. I think the neighborhood is uniformly against this new construction and this impact on the residential neighborhood. I can say from personal experience because I live here, just at a property that would be one building over from the proposed site, that the traffic issue is already very cumbersome. I'm happy to share the screen in terms of pictures of the traffic as it is now during school hours to give the board an idea of just how significant of a problem it is already. Most residents find it difficult to even exit Bodwell Terrace as it stands to turn onto Millburn Avenue. My wife has had an accident there before, being hit as she makes the turn. We have over a dozen school-aged children on the street who are playing during all pretty much daylight hours whenever they're not in school. So it is a huge concern for me, as I have two children who are regularly playing in the street, either soccer or just running around with their neighbors and friends. So I don't know if, I mean, as a consequence of this hearing having stretched out for now over 1 year, I have heard the board entertain variances from other applications. And to me, it is shocking that this is even being discussed, because I have seen projects that require far smaller variances not being approved. This particular project requires incredibly huge variances compared to what is established. I have, as I stated previously, I found Mr. Flynn's testimony to be very problematic in that it did not consider this usable square footage of a building, did not consider the fact that all the churches that were being used as an example, a majority of the churches that were being used as an example of houses of worship that potentially had even greater exceptions in terms of coverage being built basically before the age of cars. And I mean, at least 3 of them, a quick Google search revealed that they were built in 1860, 1870. And I can submit those dates if this is to the board's liking, but I would imagine that anybody with a Google can easily access this information. And these are single floor buildings, not the structures that are being proposed by the current applicant. So I don't find this convincing at all as a reason to impede on the residential nature of the neighborhood. I don't know if the board is interested in seeing the pictures or brief video clips of the current traffic issues already at the site, or if the more appropriate course of action is to submit this to the board via some other means.
No, Sergey, if you want to refer to evidence, you should submit it now. And you should describe, lay a foundation for it so everyone knows what it is that we're looking at. And then you would be certainly subject to any questions from Mr. Levine or anyone else.
I'm happy to share either footage or stills from traffic.
Let's go with the stills, okay? You can share your screen and show the
Okay.
stills, and we'll admit that, the video, not so much.
Okay, let me open just the stills.
Please describe each one. How many do you have?
I mean, I have several, but I can submit, for example, 5.
Okay, let's keep it to the 5 and then just describe each one as they come up.
All right, well, so Sergey, you heard my comment to Mr. Flynn that anything that is being submitted as an exhibit must be provided to Ms. Davitt at the conclusion.
Yes, I will need somebody to maybe repeat the precise address, email address to which to send it to. That's the only thing.
Okay, I believe Ms. Davitt's email address is on the board's website.
All right, I will look for it.
All right, and what we'll do is, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, mark this particular exhibit as Sergey 1, which will consist of, I believe he said, 5 photographs.
Right, so you'll just send those 5 photographs to Eileen.
Or you know, why don't we have it, was it Kurlov? Last name?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kurlov 1.
Go ahead.
1 second. I mean, all right. So I will share actually probably just 4 pictures for the sake of time. Is this other photos right now currently visible?
No.
No.
Okay, let me try one more time. What
There we
about
go.
now?
You got it.
All right, so
Okay, this
for
is
wait,
this
hold
is-
on. So the record's clear. The following 4 photographs, and Mr. Kurlov will have to provide a foundation for them. We're going to mark them as a set as Kurlov 1. So why don't you, for each one, explain what we're looking at, who took them?
For the
What
record,
time?
all of these photos were taken by me. This was taken roughly a year ago in October. I apologize. This is representative of every morning
Okay, wait,
commute.
hold on. So the first photograph is taken from October 2021,
2021, yes.
approximately what time in the morning?
The first pictures are taken approximately at 7:50 in the morning.
7:50, 7:50?
Yes.
And where were you standing when this photograph was
This is
taken?
showing an intersection of Bodwell Terrace and Millburn Avenue, precisely where the proposed structure
Sir,
is.
do you recall if this was a weekday or a weekend day?
This is a weekday,
Thank
judging by the fact that there is school buses in this particular photo.
Do you know what day it was?
I can look up exactly what day based on the timestamp of the picture. But all of these pictures are
Okay.
representative of a single trip to the street. These photos are representative of every school morning.
Every school morning at what time?
At 8 in the morning in the case of this picture. This is representative of about 7:30 in the morning to about 8:10 in the morning.
Okay, please proceed.
So what you see here is both the amount of traffic most of us have to deal with to get out onto the street on a weekday. You also will see in a number of these pictures, children both trying to cross the street as well as commuting to other schools in the neighborhood, meaning presumably the child riding the bicycle here is likely not going to the high school, but going to the middle school. The following picture is taken at the same time. However, I had to cross the street, which took some effort. I can remember that even now, just because of the amount of traffic. And now looking back at Bodwell Terrace, and again, the corner is the location of a proposed property.
So wait, where,
I'm standing on Millburn
wait, hold
Ave.
on a second, please. For each photograph, you have to say date,
No,
time, place, location.
October 4th, 2021, 7:50 in the morning. The previous picture, based on the timestamp, was taken at 7:46.
And where are you standing when you took this photo?
Standing on the sidewalk of Millburn Avenue, looking at Bodwell Terrace. That is the street sign that is visible on the corner across in the center of the photograph.
Okay, and your camera is facing Bodwell Terrace across the street
Yes,
on Millburn Avenue?
correct.
Your next picture.
This is standing on Bodwell Terrace, looking down
We're
the
not,
hill.
we're not
Did
seeing a
advance.
third photo.
Are you seeing the picture now?
No.
No. All right, that's photo 4, it looks like.
Correct.
Okay, please proceed.
This is standing on Bodwell Terrace, looking down the street. Taken at 7:57 a.m. on the same day. What you see is one, already some cars parked on the street. Second is you're seeing a line of 2 or 3 cars trying to get out. For most of us living on this small dead-end street, we know that there are plenty of times during the day that it can take 5 minutes or more to get off the street onto the intersection with Millburn Avenue, simply because of a flow of traffic. Quite frankly, it's actually easier to do that during this much traffic because at least the traffic is not moving as fast. This is again representative of what a morning commute looks like.
Are you going to be showing us photo number 3?
This, I can. Honestly, I will click on it now and I might as well submit it. This is perhaps not related to the case. This is looking into the current property where Kai Center is proposed, demonstrating that actually currently is being used as a parking lot, which quite frankly actually adds to the existing problems on the street. But I don't think I was going to skip it because I assume it is not relevant to the present case, although quite frankly is a disturbance to the neighborhood.
Your 5th photo.
My 5th photo, and I have to correct myself. So the previous photo, this one, I looked at the wrong timestamp. This one is taken at 3 p.m. So this is what afternoon traffic looks like.
So this 5th photo is from 3:00 p.m.
Sorry, so both the photo on the screen now and the next photo I'm showing is taken at 3:01 and 3:02 respectively.
Okay, the photo that you're showing right now is from Bodwell, the end of Bodwell Terrace facing Millburn Avenue, correct?
Correct.
And that's around 3:00 p.m. in October of 2021?
Correct.
During a weekday?
During a weekday.
And then going to the last photo.
And going to the last photo, taken 1 minute later, looking down the street. Again, down Millburn Avenue, standing on the corner with Bodwell Terrace as the street sign clearly indicates. What I'm not submitting by recommendation of a board is the video clips, which show that with all this traffic, on top of everything, we have kids constantly trying to cross the street. There is no really convenient crosswalk there, and kids are trying to get to school that is nearby. This includes children that live on Bodwell Terrace.
Okay, do you have anything further?
Not at this time. I don't know if you wanted me to stay on to answer any questions about this.
Okay, then you can stop sharing your screen.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple of questions, and I think they all pertain to what I believe is photo 4. It's the one at the back of Bodwell Terrace, looking back down towards Millburn.
Yes.
Can you click on that, please? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is on the right-hand side of the photo, there appears to be signage, the top one, where they seem to state parking restrictions. Is that correct? Are those parking restriction signs?
The restriction sign is for no more than 2 hours of parking during certain hours.
Do you know what those hours are?
Do you know what the hours are? I think in general, there is no parking for more than 2 hours except 2 residents of Bodwell Terrace. Residents of Bodwell Terrace can get an excuse or an exception. I will also add that this is persistently and constantly violated. So
I'm sorry, it's
much
what?
persistently that rule is violated, so much so that we have had cases where a fire truck has trouble getting up the street.
That led to what I think is my last question, sir, which is how often do cars currently park on Bodwell along the street?
A lot.
And what days of the week do you experience that?
It is both during weekdays and during weekends. So while what I'm submitting is purely photos taken on one day, sometime last year, that reflects the fact that I work in the city as a scientist. The problem is nearly as bad during many weekdays because the high school next to us frequently holds soccer, football, lacrosse, basketball games, you name it. And the traffic during those events is just as bad. And those are held both in the afternoons, mornings, and evenings on weekends.
So are you finding that currently you're having cars parking on both sides of Bodwell or just one?
Yeah, it's on both. It's wherever you don't have driveways.
And how far does it stretch? All the way back up to the dead end, or does it stop far away typically?
It depends on whether this is related to school hour parking, meaning teachers and kids, or relates to events, as in the case of soccer, basketball, football games. So it just is day and event and time dependent. Also depends on how frequently that particular week the police chooses to enforce the no parking.
So I think you had indicated that it was maybe less than satisfactory to you, but you have witnessed the police enforcing the no parking, giving citations and what have you?
I know that we have, not me personally, but we as a neighborhood have complained about this before, and occasionally for a little bit of time it eases up and then reoccurs again.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Levine?
I have no further comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we'll be moving to, I believe it's Mr. Solomon Lama.
Okay, Mr. Lama, if you would just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Your name and address for the record, please.
438 Millburn Avenue. My name is Solomon, S-A-L-O-M-O-N, Lama, L-A-M-A.
Please proceed with your comment.
I have 4 points. Again, I live at 438 Millburn Avenue. I have repeatedly reminded people who have testified that I live across the street from the proposed site. This was also the case at the previous hearing 20 years ago. Originally, the plan was to have access to the site on Bodwell Terrace. 20 years ago, there was, and this was in live, and I just happened to be at the board meeting to support my neighbors across the street and find out what's going on. At the board meeting, it was changed. It said, "Oh no, we're going to make it access to Millburn Avenue." And again, I have to remind the attorney at the time that, no, I live across the street. It's not the high school. It is my property that's across the street. So I'd like to, again, remind the board that we have several houses that are across the street from the property in question. While it was operating as a home that provided houses of worship, services of worship at home, an accident did happen that affected my family. A car, and I have police report to present and share. A car did come down the driveway, crashed into my fence. I happened to just stop mowing the lawn, crashed right into my lawnmower, destroyed my mailbox, destroyed a housing for holding a hose. And if it not for one of those things, the car would have hit my home. In addition, in the car were 2 children, 5 and 4 years old at the time. It was a Friday. It was not the residents that, it was a guest to the house that were the owner of those cars. So it is dangerous, that driveway. Okay, it has happened before. It's not hypothetical. So I'd be happy to provide that police report. I have the police number for the record. It's 02-6339.
Are you presenting that, what, on a screen, or what are you doing?
I can do either. I can present it on the screen, or I can email it as well. By the way, I looked for the email address on the website. I don't see it. I'll be happy to provide my email address. It's easy enough to write down, and you can send me an email and I'll be happy to reply. Would that be satisfactory?
Eileen, can you share that email address?
Sure, it's just my name, my first initial E, last name Davitt, DAVITT, at millburntwp.org.
Thank you.
TWP.
.org.
Oh, Millburn. Okay, Millburn.
TWP.org.
Okay, thank you. Sure, I'll be happy to share it. Let me know when you want me to do that.
Well, if it's gonna be part of the record, then why don't we mark it as Llama 1? And why don't you share the screen just so that Mr. Levine and members of the public can see the exhibit you're referring to.
What's the date of this event?
This is 2002, Mr. Lama.
I am looking,
Yes.
2002, yes.
April 26th.
My wife reminds me that it's April 26th.
Okay, and so what you're showing, what's been marked as Llama 1, is a copy of a New Jersey police accident report regarding an accident that occurred on your property from a vehicle that was, what, exiting the subject property?
It was parked in the property and with no driver, the car went down the driveway and hit my property with 2 occupants. I'm having trouble scrolling up and down. I might have to stop sharing and share again. Would that be acceptable?
Sure. So you're saying this car rolled out of the property in question into yours, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
1 second. Open this again.
And to do that, it had to roll across Millburn Avenue to do that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Give me 1 more second. And okay, I have ability to scroll from the email, so let me do that.
Okay, we got it.
So this is 2002.
Yes.
Okay.
And here is the accident description.
Right. So how many pages is this report?
2 pages.
Okay.
So I can scroll up and down so that you
Okay.
can
No,
read it.
we get it.
And so your point in submitting this is,
It's a very steep driveway. It will be a steep driveway, and with the increased traffic, be a danger to my home and my neighbors.
Anything further to share on this?
No.
Okay,
It
then
speaks for itself.
please submit it. And you can
Will do.
stop your screen share. Any other comments, Mr. Lama?
Yes, 2 more.
Sure.
Regarding traffic, Millburn Avenue at this point is a choke point. There's no other way of pointing it out. You obstruct traffic there, and Millburn Avenue shuts down. There's no way around the high school. You have to double back. So it is dangerous at best to try and cross Millburn Avenue. There are no crosswalks nearby. It reminds me of some neighborhoods where your bus drops you off across the street and you have to walk half a mile across to go to the other side. Adding more traffic to this choke point is hazardous, especially with the high school. And a monthly basis, I hear cars screeching in the back, kids having joyrides in the back in the high school. They remove the safety bumpers between the driveways, so that it's just going to add more to the neighborhood that already can't support the traffic that's there now. The rabbi asked one of the residents across the street a question, whether he would prefer that a house of worship or that he would move into the neighborhood and provide services. I wish he asked me that question. I know it was an inappropriate thing to ask, but that would be a better solution than to building a house of worship there, because if he leaves, it remains a house of worship. It remains, and to the neighborhood. Our neighborhood has suffered over the decades. We lost our elementary school, is now brought back as a Central 5 school. We're segregated from our neighbors. My children went to school with the children across the street with no way of accessing them. No way of crossing the street and just go play with their classmates. The neighbors behind me go to a different school. Just to add this would just be, insult to injury. So I thank the board for its time. I know it's been a long haul. I personally believe that you've heard this case before. It's still not enough. It doesn't meet the land acreage requirement. So again, thank you and have a good afternoon. And any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Lama. Next up, we have.
Just one or
Mr.
two.
Levine, you have
Oh, I'm sorry,
questions?
Mr. Levine. Go ahead.
Sorry, that's all right. Mr. Lana, just a couple of questions. The accident that you were referring to.
Yes.
It's your understanding that there was a car, I guess, parked in the parking area, and then rolled down the driveway across Millburn Avenue?
No, it was parked in the driveway and then it rolled down to Millburn.
So that, I take it that's the same, configuration that exists today in terms of, the driveway location and layout?
I couldn't speak to that.
have you looked at the site plans that we've submitted to the board in support of this application that has the survey of existing site conditions and then the proposed site plan?
Yes, once.
I was just wondering if you'd, so obviously it would be a concern of yours that a car rolled into your home. On sheet 2 of the site plan, it has the topographic survey and existing conditions, and it shows the existing driveway, which is essentially a straight shot down the grade of the subject property down into Millburn Avenue. If you just compare that with the proposed site plan, it's shown in the plan, the new proposed configuration, where the parking is to the west of the proposed house of worship, you have to take a 90-degree turn, either left if you're parked further to the north, or right if you're parked closer to Millburn Avenue, a 90-degree turn to access the driveway. And that parking area, between the parking area and Millburn Avenue, has guardrails and also a series of retaining walls, just by way of comparing and contrasting the layout of what's existing as opposed to what's proposed.
Okay.
And last question, since this incident
Well,
happened,
I didn't get the question. What was the question?
had you compared what's existing as opposed to what's
okay.
proposed in terms of the driveway layout?
Okay. Yes. Okay.
And my last question is just, you'd said this had happened in 2002. Has anything similar happened in the intervening 20 years?
No.
Thank you.
I can see that with the new plan that this particular accident would not occur. It will be different. It's still dangerous.
Understood. Thank you.
Oh, and there is a difference between then and now. It's not operating as a house.
Anything further? Mr. Levine?
No more questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for comments, Mr. Lama. Next up, we have Yasir Imtiaz.
All right, if you would just raise your right hand. Do you swear from testimony you're about to give in today's proceedings to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name, spelling your name and your address, please.
Yeah, my name is Yasir Imtiaz. First name Yasir, Y-A-S-I-R. Last name Imtiaz, I-M-T-I-A-Z, and I live on 9 Bardwell.
Please proceed.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I just want to thank Jack and Sergey, my neighbors. And Jack, you can see it's so important for all of us that he is even giving his statement from hospital bed. That's the kind of like a pain that the whole neighborhood is going through for the last 1 year. Have been pretty much on each and every hearing for the last 1 year. I myself is, by the way, sick today, but because of this, I thought it's the last one. I have to come and give my statement. And again, this is the kind of like a pain the whole neighborhood is going through, that we cannot even miss a single hearing because of our personal or health issues. The thing is that for the last 1 year, I have not heard a single solid argument or statement from the applicant which states that it's a different application. The only thing which I hear is that, yeah, it was a different printer on which the application was printed and typed, and the new pen was used to sign the application. But other than that, I do not hear a single comment from anyone. All of their so-called experts in the last, I don't know how many nights they wasted all of our time, and they were not able to make any single argument on that. And Mr. Jack very rightly pointed out that they did not produce a single evidence on the traffic situation. And thank you very much to Saji and to Solomon to present the traffic situation here. They are here longer than I'm here in this neighborhood. This is a proper residential area, zone 6, for God's sake. It's not a some commercial area. People live across the street, Millburn Avenue, where the proposed site is. It's a dead-end street. People live here. There's only one way going in and out of the street, which is the Millburn Avenue. And if there is a traffic situation, the things get very worst here. And Saji, I think, was trying to make that point, and very validly. And all of our children, and if you come any point of the day, especially this Thursday and Friday will be the long weekend, I invite all of you, come here. Let's see how people, kids will be outside playing, all of that stuff. That scenario, the characteristics of the residential area will be changed overnight if we let this happen on this proposed site. They are asking for a lot of variations, and Jack has already pointed out all of those very well. I will not go there again. I just say that whatever he said, I support his argument on that. But they are not only asking for a variance on this proposed site, but they're also asking for another variance, which we never talked about, and which is to combine 3 lots and make it 1 lot. That's also a variance, which they have never mentioned even a single, because they know they are a guilty party here. So they intentionally avoided that on that. And the other thing is that it's a hazardous for our neighborhood, all of that. And I will be living next to this proposed site. If that happens, all of my privacy and everything will be ruined overnight. It's a light, it's the people coming in and out every day of the time. And then as Mr. Jack also pointed out, that they are not only using Bardwell as an emergency entry or exit, but also for pedestrian, which means that, and you cannot stop on a house of worship. My personal experience, from all of yours personal experiences as well. When it's a house of worship, you cannot stop people from coming in on any single day or night. You cannot say, you know, it's the holiday time, only then you can come, or you can come only on Monday. So as a house of worship, house of God, you can come anytime, any time of the day. How can you stop people from coming in? They don't have they were not able to prove in a single hearing where they will park those extra cars. They said they have already talked to this St. Rose of Lima church about the parking spot, but they were not able to produce a single evidence that they actually did talk to them about that. And then they said they have talked to the high school guys, the management, that they will be able to use their space, but they were not, again. So it was just talk, and talk, nothing else. And my last request to the board will be to really, you know, let's just not waste each other's time. I'm very empathetically, I'm just saying this. There are a lot of properties in this whole neighborhood which you wasted. There is this property where they are building now. It's just that this in Springfield, it's not the Short Hills, but just across the road. It's a huge property lot there. And then there is this former Wells Fargo Bank just across on the street where the precinct is. You wasted that, and where this temporarily they shifted the Millburn Library. That was a huge lot. Why don't you go there? Why are you destroying the residential characteristics of this neighborhood? Why you want to do this? Is this the inheritance benefit of any house of worship? No, it is not. It is for the benefit of the people, not to destroy their lives. It's very hazardous. This is dangerous to our neighborhood characteristics. It's dangerous to our kids who you know, openly, since it's a dead end, they just very fearlessly these days, you know, right now just play there without any fear of any upcoming outgoing traffic. We know they are our kids, so everyone is careful, but can you stop if some unknown person are approaching this street? Can you stop them? Can you ask them to obey the law and everything? You cannot do that. Really. That's all, Mr. Chairman. That's all from my side. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Imtiaz. Mr. Levine, any cross?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions from comments from members of the audience? I do not see any hands raised. Oh, one more. Pretty is back.
Hi.
Wait. Raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, spelling your name, please.
My name is Priti, Priti. My last name is Goswami, Goswami. My address is 24 Bardwell Terrace, Millburn, New Jersey.
Ms. Goswami, your comments, please.
Hi, I apologize for before. Looks it's just that I'm very anxious about this, so I didn't realize that I will have an opportunity to speak. Thank you for giving the opportunity again. I have 4 points, as I have shared before. The first point and the foremost for me is children playing on the street. We are cramping the structure, which needs 3 acres of land in 0.85 acre property, and there will be overflow of traffic and people. There are 24 children on our street from the age group of 1 year to 13 years.
Just made history as the first female to ever play division.
Since we have a small front and backyard, our kids do play on the block, and it's not, Mr. Levine last time asked me, do I just let our kid go out and play? It's not like that. It's a very secure block, and we feel comfortable while kids are playing outside on our dead-end street. Once this development starts, we are not going to feel that secure, and we will not be able to let our kids play outside the way we do now. Approving this structure strips away a simple privilege for our kids to go out and play. This makes us lose our peace of mind, and this compromises the mental health, well-being, and safety of our children. My second point, we had been discussing people's movement, traffic flow, and parking, and it's being justified every time, saying that it will be regulated by authorities. As Mr. Imtiaz said, we cannot stop people. Again, squeezing the property in less than 30% area and the kind of overflow of people and vehicle that's going to happen, we need to think, whose headache or problem is it going to be if these regulations are not followed? Right now, we all in the evenings compromising our family time and spending time here. Later, if we have to follow up on this, we'll have to compromise our work-related time and go and deal with the authorities and talk to authorities and follow up on this. And there is no assurance on this one. My third point, considering that the proposal is for fitting and establishing a house of worship on the piece of property, which is providing not even 30% of the requirement on the basis of public interest and freedom of religion, because there is no house of worship in this town, which was quoted by Mr. Flynn during his testimony last meeting, we do want to think that is it reasonable to believe that anyone who doesn't have a temple of worship in this area can propose to build a house of worship on a current less than half-acre properties, as long as they hire a technical team who tries to assure that it will be in the small scale of nature and sites which will be conducive and we will apply strict requirements. Anybody can do that, and we will be sitting here for hours and hours together again and again to deal with this. We really need to think about it. Thank you for your time, and I really do appreciate the patience shown by members of the board. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Swami. Mr. Levine?
Just one question. I'm trying to understand what it is about this development proposal and this application that you feel is going to jeopardize the existing safety of the neighborhood there on Bodwell Terrace.
So, Mr. Levin, if you come and spend some time on the street, already we have people who come and takes the U-turn. They come at the end of the Bodwell Terrace and gets into our parking lots and take the U-turns because they have taken a wrong turn. At the end of the day, everybody relies on GPS. People will be, we don't have enough of parking spaces. We know that. For this property, we don't have enough of parking spaces. We are asking for variation for that. We do not have enough of spaces to accommodate the people. There is going to be overflow. And we are having children, our kids are playing outside. People will be coming, if for nothing else than taking for U-turn and going back. People will be walking around. Nobody's mistake. We are squeezing this big thing in this small piece of land, and it's going to happen. We see it happening, as Mr. Sergey has said, as Mr. Imtiaz has said, at so many different incidences, and it's not going to be different for this particular incident. But the only difference is going to be, this is going to be a regular thing.
And in your view, it's not a regular thing now, the traffic and the U-turns and the parking along Bodwell?
So we want to increase it just because it's regular now? Yes, it is regular now, and it's only going to get worse.
So it's chiefly you're talking about increased traffic then, in terms of the dangerous aspect in your view?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Swami. Any further comment?
Nilo,
Okay, then next up we have Samir Navani.
But wait, raise your right hand. Do you swear from testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name, spelling your name and address, please.
So my name is Samir, Samir, and the last name is Navani, Navani. The address is 6 Bodwell Terrace, right across from this proposed house of worship location. So I don't have any proofs to submit, but my car was actually hit in the rear end while it was parked in my driveway. It's possibly, as everybody has stated over here, there are a lot of school students who park the car over here, and I mean, thanks to your client, he actually leaves out the space for more students to park the car. So it seems to be some reckless driving, and there was loss of or damage to a property while it was sitting in the driveway. I don't have proof to submit, but I've had that issue. And I would agree and concur with everybody's point that this is just going to increase the traffic situation in the neighborhood. It's a threat to property, it's a threat to life as well. And even in the current setup, just to get from Bodwell Terrace to the train station, which should be like a 2-minute drive, with the traffic, it has gone up to 10 minutes. So I cannot even imagine if I have to drive up someone to an ER in St. Barnabas, I can never take Millburn Avenue right now. So you can imagine with the increased traffic, once this gets approved, it's just going to get worse.
Thank you, Mr. Navani. Mr. Levine, any comment, questions?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll be moving on to Aso Khan. Please turn on your camera and microphone.
All right, sir, if you would just raise your right hand, please.
Yep.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address, please. Spelling your name, please.
Okay, my name is Mariyappan Ashokan, Mariappan, Ashokan, Asokan. I live in 14 Bodwell Terrace, and I have been a resident for over 24 years. And just like Mr. Solomon, I participated in the 2002 hearing. And what I am seeing is, I don't see any big change in the request for the variance. There is no change in the lot size, obviously. And the only change that, that's proposed is, combining 2 buildings into one, and that is not, something that's a big change for me. And the proposal is to close the Bodwell's terrace entrance and put a chain link fence, which in my opinion is worse than what we had before.
because I remember driving down the street and around in 2002, people were making a left turn into the proposed Kai Center property, and they wouldn't stop, because it's a downslope, and I had to step on the brake because people coming in to enter the center were making a left turn, without stopping, without yielding. And now with the chain link fence, people are not going, they're not able to enter, they will be making a K-turn, they will be turning, U-turn, make a U-turn and then dropping off people, and it's going to be much worse. And there will be, I am expecting more congestion right near the entrance to the Bardwell Terrace. And anyone trying to make a turn into Bardwell Terrace from Millburn, they will be shocked to see cars or children running, crossing the street to go into the proposed center. So it's going to make it worse than what it is now. And also, as my neighbors share their concern, there are a lot of kids now, and it won't be safe to play in the street. It's a dead-end street, and that's why, in fact, we bought the property. But if the center is, allowed to function, we are going to see a lot of traffic, and the whole dead-end street, that atmosphere will be gone. So I request the board to deny this application. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Levine,
Thank
any
you.
questions?
No, Mr. Chairman.
This witness. Next, we'll bring back Sergey. Okay.
Just state your name again. You're still on the road.
Sergey Karalov from Bardwell Terrace. I just wanted to chime in on one more issue that was perhaps brought by Mr. Levine while questioning Dr. Goswami in terms of what impact we foresee the potential increase in traffic. I think in addition to the increase in traffic that has been brought over and over by members of the community is what makes the residential neighborhood or residential nature of this street. And that is, it's not only the fact that there will be an increase in cars and as a consequence, more danger to the kids playing on the street. It's the fact that right now, when any one of us come out, we know everybody here. This is what the residential neighborhood means. This is why most of us bought houses on a dead-end street. And in fact, I know every single witness that has spoken before you today, except maybe for Mr. Solomon, which unfortunately we're separated by Milton Ave from. But everybody else on the street is familiar to us. So when you question as to how or why we feel safe with children playing on the street that already has increase in traffic, already has issue with congestion and parked spaces, is that for the most part, when we look outside the window, we recognize every neighbor here. In fact, the only neighbor that I'm not familiar with is Rabbi Bogomilsky, because I have never met him at any of the gatherings of the neighborhood. Yet if this proposal goes forward, aside from the fact that you are asking for variance for number of spaces, that is unacceptable in my opinion. Basically, you barely have half the spaces for what is required for that size structure, or for this house of worship. So aside from the fact that there will be cars coming in, turning around, making U-turns on this small residential street, it's the fact that you also will have a lot more foot traffic. You will have a lot more faces that are unfamiliar to any of us, that will be different from day to day. So aside from that, we have to consider the fact that that also will eat into the residential neighborhood nature of this dead-end street, And that arguably is as much of an impact, if not more, especially given that you yourself said that there will be one exit onto our small dead-end street that is specifically meant for foot traffic. So I just wanted to make sure I bring this to the board's attention and hope that the board will hopefully unanimously agree that this is not in the spirit of the residential street as we have it now in the neighborhood that we have now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I do have one follow-up question. So I believe you had testified earlier, your first time around, that you've observed that there are a number of cars that are already parking on both sides of Bodwell, often in connection with high school events at Millburn High School, whether it's soccer or sports or what have you, and that you've experienced people parking, and presumably if they're going to events at Millburn High School, they're getting out of their cars, they're walking down Bodwell, they're crossing Millburn and going to the high school.
Right, I think this gets at the same question you had for Dr. Goswami, that there is already a problem. Yes, there is. Nonetheless, the flow of people is not quite the same because most of those parking events happen as a wave and disappear as a wave. So
No, I understand, but you'd also testified now your second time around that part of the reason that you kind of value your neighborhood and would like it to stay as it is you have familiar faces around, your neighbors, your friends, kind of familiar with the folks in the neighborhood. So these people that are parking along Millburn Avenue and going to events at the high school, I take it these folks are not from your neighborhood as best as you can tell?
No.
And you don't know them, their faces aren't familiar?
Correct.
And they're getting out of their cars and they're walking up and down Bodwell and coming back, and you don't quite know when or who they are. Does that make you feel particularly unsafe or uncomfortable?
It actually does, yes. I'm concerned every time I see an unfamiliar face. And when kids are playing, I make sure to keep an eye on exactly that.
And you think this?
So if a car pulls up, I actually do pay attention and see where this unfamiliar adult might be going relative to where my kids are.
And you think that this application, if it were approved, would make that worse?
I feel that it would significantly increase the amount of foot traffic and car traffic that is already beyond what I would ideally like, but I also realize that none of us live in a bubble. I think that the applicant's argument that there is already traffic, so why not make it worse, is not exactly something that I would find particularly appealing.
Thank you.
Anything further, Sergey?
I think everything else echoes the comments already made, and the only comments that I haven't heard is from any neighbors that actually support this application.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up, we have, looks like Ms. Swami is back.
You were previously sworn. Just state your name again for the record.
Name is Priti Goswami, Priti, last name Goswami, address 24 Bodwell Terrace, Millburn, New Jersey.
Please proceed.
So, Mr. Levine, I know the question was for Mr. Sergey, but I would like to just chime in one more thing, that yes, when there are incidences, when there are too many cars and there are games and too many parking happening, we do not let our children out at that time. So to your point, and to our point, actually, you're right. That is an inconvenience, and our children are restricted during that moment. And this particular structure will only make it worse. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Looks like we have John V.
Just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yep.
Your name and address for the record, spelling your name.
John, John, Vergara, V as in Victor, E-R-G as in good, A-R-A. I live in 22 Bodwell Terrace.
Go ahead, Mr. Vergara.
Thank you for allowing me to give comment. I just want to reiterate something that's been said multiple times by multiple residents in the neighborhood. I myself have a 3-year-old, and as I think Preeti said, there's about 24 kids that live on the block. I really do think that, you know, having this approved would certainly increase the amount of car traffic, foot traffic, and that certainly will increase the risk to, you know, our children playing in the street. It's a more acute for folks with short legs. They do not move as fast as us adults, and especially for younger children, I think it would pose a higher risk to have even more traffic come through. Even though, you know, yes, we do have a traffic problem now. And again, this is reiterating arguments that have been made from my neighbors. You know, increasing the traffic, you know, is definitely not something we want, and would definitely increase the risk to our children. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sylvine.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, we have Swamya Jaram. Any luck with that one, Eileen?
Done it 3 times.
Yeah, I tried it too. Or Mr. or Mrs. Duran, we cannot bring you over. It's not allowing us to promote you to a panelist. So if you want, try to log in or log back out. Stress account again. Folks, try to collect all your thoughts. I'm not limiting to what you can, how many times you can come back and get a bite of the apple, but for the sake of being concise, let's try to get it all together in one shot. So Mr. Essakan will bring you over again. Camera and microphone, please.
Yep.
Name and address for the record, if you could.
Okay, Mariappan Ashokan again, 14 Bardwell Terrace. So I forgot to mention one thing. When we moved in 1998, you know, we heard the hearing in 2002, and as Mr. Gordon said, there was a hearing in 1994 which we were not aware of. So this seems like a 3rd time the applicant is trying to get a variance, and it seems like a harassment to the neighbors, because, you know, as everyone is, everyone is spending time participating in the hearing, it takes a lot of energy out of us. So I think, you know, I really don't understand, you know, this is a 3rd time, you know, even though 2 times it was denied. Why is the applicant trying again and again? So it's a waste of time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any cross, Mr. Levine?
No.
Any further comment from anyone in the audience? I see no hands raised. At this point, then we will close public comment. One more, Mr. Gordon.
Just two quick things. One,
Just give me your name and address quick.
Jack Gordon, 27 Bodwell Terrace. I want to emphasize something that Sergey mentioned in passing. This board has heard from more than a dozen residents. Not a single person has spoken in favor of this application besides Rabbi Bogomirsky and his hired guns. You should take that into account. It's important. The second thing I'd like to do, if I can manage it, and I'm going to try to do that right now, is if you'll permit me to share screen, I would like to play a video that my daughter, who is at Millburn High, made within the last 10 days as part of an assignment for her video class with respect to current events.
What's this video? What is this video going to entail?
This is going to entail a background of this application, have some insights into the pros and cons of it, provide some drone footage so the board could better understand the relationship between the proposed house of worship and the high school and the potential impact on the high school students of additional traffic and an additional business, albeit a house of worship, in front of the high school.
Rob, third-party testimony, we're going with that?
Yeah, no. So, Mr. Gordon, is your daughter was the one who created this video?
Correct, and she's underage.
Well, it's not a question of whether she's underage or not. She could still testify. Is she available to provide testimony to support the video that she alone created?
Yes, although she's in a different house because I'm in a hospital.
Right. Well, does she have the ability to present the video herself, even if it's from a different location?
Yes, she should, but I need to contact her. Let me text her. Right on. Please log on if you're not already logged on.
What's her name?
Sonia Gordon.
Yeah, I don't see her here. Look, this is a bit of a stretch. So if she can't get on right away, this testimony is not going to be able to be submitted.
I understand. She's also a student studying on a school night. So I texted her and said, please log on now.
Do you have any further comment, Mr. Gordon?
No, beyond the opportunity to show my daughter's project, I think that the cumulative evidence of universal disdain for this application as expressed by the community, coupled with my statements about the extreme nature of the litany of variances that are being sought, coupled with the fact that this is not the first time the High Center has made this application, coupled with the notion that res judicata and collateral estoppel should apply, I think that's really the meat and potato, if you will. I think my daughter's video would provide the gravy, though this meal is complete without it. It would, I think, benefit all of us to have the privilege of seeing her hard work.
Okay, well, at this point, she is not logged on, so we're not going to spend more time on this. So if she logs on in the next few minutes, we'll go with it. But at this point, I don't see her here.
I understand, Craig, I do.
Okay. In that case, then, I do not see any other hands are up. There we go. There's a hand raised. So we will now be moving to no, wait. Did you pull that over, Eileen? Oh, you did. Okay, great.
She's here. But Miss, if you would just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please state your name, spelling your name and your address.
Soumya Jairam, SOWMYA, last name JAIRAM. Address is 17 Bodwell Terrace.
Excuse me, 1 second. Can we take Mr. Gordon off, please? Thank you.
Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, I'm not going to be making a lot of very new points, but I want to reiterate that the appeal of the street is that it's a dead end. As you can see, I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I am very comfortable, honestly, letting my 7-year-old at least play out, go out to her neighbors, her friends' homes by herself. When we don't have strange trucks or cars on a street, and it doesn't happen very often, at least not every day. And that, especially during the pandemic, it was a big lifesaver. It saved our sanity in many cases and our kids' social and mental well-being. The appeal of the street is that it's a dead end and that we know all of our neighbors, we know all the kids here, everybody knows us. And that comfort of knowing that the kids, that we are safe, is not the same if there are strangers. Obviously, it's not a given that any stranger is dangerous, but it's also not, we also have to be careful. That's one point. And the second point is that with the Wells Fargo and the apartments on Upper Millburn Avenue coming up, the traffic situation has gotten much, much worse in the last several weeks, probably months. Literally at around 5 o'clock, I am not usually out because my kids take the bus. So I don't have any pictures, but I take my kids to karate at the end of Millburn Avenue. And it takes 15-20 minutes to get in and get out of the karate class, which is at the opposite Walgreens on the end of Millburn Ave. And it's a several car blockage that happens around, I don't know if it's throughout the day, if it's just during that time, but it has gotten much, much, much worse. And it's with the apartments coming up, it's not going to get any better. There's going to be a lot more traffic. Millburn Avenue in general, I mean, Bodwell Terrace, I understand Mr. Levine said that the cars are not going to get into Bodwell Terrace, that they will be going into and out of the property from Millburn Avenue. But that doesn't actually make me feel any better, because that only means that Millburn Avenue is going to become even more chaotic with cars trying to get in and out of the property. And I was previously on one of the pedestrian safety advisory board, and this intersection was actually sorry, my kids are have to get to bed. But this intersection was actually a point of contention, and there were talks about doing something to help traffic better, about having cross hatching and other things. Basically, all that to say that the traffic and the appeal of a street, the comfort of our kids is a concern already with the increased traffic, and it would definitely not make it better with if this application was approved. So yeah, just a show of support for all my neighbors who are on this call, have been on this call for many times.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Levine, any cross on this?
No.
We'll be moving to Leslie Schulman.
Is Mr. Lama supposed to be on here?
No, he should be removed. Good evening, Mr. Schulman.
Please raise your right hand. You swear from testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Name and address for the record.
My name is Leslie Schulman and I'm at 10 Bodwell Terrace. I've lived in this town, Millburn Short Hills, for close to 30 years. When I bought my house on Bodwell in 2016, I went before the board with variances and we went back and forth because they thought it was too big for the street. What we ended up coming back with was about 200 square feet of floor area ratio. They've said that it was too big, it didn't fit the character of the neighborhood. So here we are talking about a temple at the end of the street, and even though it's facing Millburn Avenue, it's going to be a large part of the beginning of Bodwell Terrace. And I don't understand how that can fit the character of the neighborhood. You know, a lot of my neighbors, their concerns are about the traffic and everything, and it's very true. What's going to happen is people are going to park on the street and walk in and walk out. They're not going to be able to park in the driveway because there's not enough parking there. So I guess I'm trying to say it doesn't fit. It didn't fit before. And the parking, it's not about strangers or anything. It's the parking on the street is going to be a nightmare. We can't even get out of our street. If you want to make a left-hand turn onto Millburn Avenue, forget it. Just go right because there's no way you can go left. I mean, there's just, the street can't handle that. And it doesn't fit in with the character of the street.
Thank you very much. Mr. Levine?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further comment from the audience?
Actually, I have one more concern.
Please.
I know this has been going on in town for a long time. There was a lot of litigation, I guess, with the house on Jefferson and everything else. And they had like this whole group, Save Millburn, Concerned Citizens of Millburn, that got together. They had a lot of money and they hired all these people to help them with their case against the temple. I'm afraid that because of all the back and forth that's going on and all the litigation, that the board is going to say, okay, we have to give them something, give them this. And that's really my concern because our block really doesn't have those resources. So I would hate for that to happen because of that, just because if the back and forth is too much and the town just doesn't want to do it anymore. And that they just say, okay, you can be on Bodwell and Millburn Avenue.
I assure you, this isn't this board's first barbecue. We take everything seriously that comes in front of us.
No, I'm sure, but it just keeps coming back and back. And it being that we've been listening to it for the whole year, it's scary. It's like it's being strongly considered, and that's very unnerving.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? I see none, so I will close the public portion of this meeting. So at this point, as stated earlier, we will not be voting on this tonight as we only have 5 voting members here. So it's necessary for us to get a larger board. So hopefully by our next meeting, when are we going to go with Eileen?
I mean, we have. we have December 19th, when we do have 5 applications, but if we're just going to be voting on this, I don't imagine it would be a lengthy proceeding for it. I don't know.
So, Mr. Levine, how's the 19th look?
I would say the 5th, it's just that we have other members who have to listen to everything. And I don't want to, first of all, it takes a day or so before they'll get the YouTube video moving. So I don't want to run into situations where they're not ready.
Eileen, do you feel like that as far as you're aware, you know, there's a good likelihood that there'll be 7 eligible board members on the 19th?
Well, I can only ask the 5 that are here. Are you going to be here on the 19th? Honestly, I don't think a lot of us knew that we were going to be this short tonight. I
can tell you that it works fine for me, and we won't be offering any more, you know, direct testimony. So as long as, you know, we feel like it's a good night for, you know, the board to muster as many members as possible who are eligible to vote, the 19th is fine.
I don't know. What do you think? I'm going to ask Rob and Craig, only because that's our last meeting of the year. So if for some reason we aren't able to.
Well, I think it's gonna be critical that we are.
So
I mean,
do you want to,
that's-
yeah, I don't know. Is it better to, I don't know.
Well, like I said, I mean, I have no problem with the 5th as long as you think that things will be up and running.
Yeah,
In terms of
we have to
the
get,
YouTube video.
Sean Drew will have to listen to
He has
tonight.
two to catch up on.
Yeah,
Right.
I think the problem is going to be that once everyone gets back from Thanksgiving weekend, that gives them just a week,
Yeah.
right, or less. And you know, I would think that the 19th would be more prudent to give everyone an opportunity.
I think we're
And-
just
but
going to
in
have
fair-
to make everyone know that.
Yeah, and
We
but
gotta be there.
I think that in fairness to the applicant, what I would recommend is, Eileen, if you can maybe reach out to all the board members as soon as possible,
Okay.
just to get them locked into the 19th. And if there is a problem, that we make Mr. Levine aware of it immediately.
Okay.
Is that fair, Mr. Levine?
It is, certainly.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Steve.
So I'd like to know, you know, how and when we're going to make the determination if or if not this case is already settled.
That's up to you.
So that will be, so each individual board member takes that into consideration as they cast their vote.
Absolutely.
Well, right. So
It has
what's
to be
gonna
the first vote, doesn't it?
Wait, hold on. So this is what's gonna happen and what I recommend would happen. So this matter is gonna be carried to the 19th of
Mhm.
December via Zoom webinar. No further notice to be provided by the applicant. Eileen will confirm as soon as possible that there will be as many eligible board members as possible and will advise Mr. Levine accordingly. Assuming that we are proceeding on the 19th, what would happen is I assume that Mr. Levine's going to want to provide a form of summation to the board. Is that correct, Mr. Levine?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be, you know, a lengthy oration, but yes, that's correct, Mr. Simon.
So after Mr. Levine provides less than a lengthy oration to the board, I will then be providing the board with some reminders in terms of the law that is to be applied with regard to this application. Given the variances that are required and the legal issues that have been raised throughout the course of this proceeding, including but not limited to res judicata and collateral estoppel. So once I provide those, you know, I guess instructions or reminders to the board in terms of the applicable legal standards to be applied to this application, then as the chairman appropriately again stated, then it's up to the board to take all that information into consideration in deciding what to do with the application.
Okay, but I guess I'm not clear. It sounds like we're going to be voting whether we think it's already been settled or not. Is that what you're saying?
I think one of the issues that you will likely be voting on is whether you believe that the application is precluded by res judicata collateral estoppel as a matter of law. And before you do that, I will be providing the board with some recommendations, not in terms of which way you would vote or not vote, but the applicable law to be applied to the facts of the case.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions regarding that? All right, so the 19th is it, and I hope to see everyone there, of course, in the meeting of the 5th before that.
I'm sorry, correct. So this matter is being carried to December 19th at 7 o'clock via Zoom webinar. No further notice to be provided by the applicant. And again, to the extent that either the applicant and or any member of the public introduced exhibits that were marked, we ask that those be provided to Ms. Davitt at the township office as soon as possible.
Also, this meeting, this case will be heard first on that evening.
Yeah.
For those that are at home watching, but this will be the first case we hear. And then with that, is there anything from the audience that was not on the agenda this evening that someone would like to discuss? I do not see any hands raised. In that case,
I think Joe.
Joe is, Joe, do you have something?
I move we adjourn.
There we go. That was next. I have a move. Can I have a second?
Wait, can I interrupt the motion for a second?
Sure.
To make a sub motion? I know I'm not really supposed to, but I'd like to make a motion that we all wish Eileen a happy birthday, which is tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday.
Second that.
I finally get a motion.
Back to the
I
motion
finally
on
get
the
a
table.
motion approved. It's a miracle.
Right.
I second Joe's motion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone in favor?
Aye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye now.
Good evening.